Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm a 31-year-old guy, and I've been in a relationship with my soon-to-be ex-wife, who's 28 for 7 years. We were married for 5 of those years. We both had jobs that made us think kids weren't in our plans, but we had so many other amazing plans for our future. Throughout the 7 years we were together, we never had any disagreements about the direction we wanted to take or the goals we had for our future. So, back in February, my wife started a new job, and that's when she met this guy, her coworker, who's 38 years old. After her 2-week training, she came home, and I noticed that she was chatting a lot with this guy. I've never been a jealous person, and I understand that our industry is male-dominated, so she's often surrounded by guys. I always trusted her and never questioned her loyalty or boundaries. However, I couldn't help but notice that she was texting this guy a lot. In March, I brought it up twice, expressing my concerns, but she reassured me that he's just a friend and I shouldn't worry. They had common interests, like being Christians, and they chatted a lot about the Bible. I'm not religious. She even said that she would stop talking to him if I felt uncomfortable, but I knew they were going for training together again at the end of March. I realized it would be impossible to stop her from talking to him, so I didn't push the issue further. I always made sure to check in with my wife to see if she was happy in our marriage or if there was anything I could do to improve things. I never received any negative feedback from her, and even as recently as mid-March, she was telling me that I was the best thing that ever happened to her. However, things took a turn when she left for a month of job training in a different location at the end of March. In the first few days, everything seemed normal between us, but as the week progressed, we started to fight a lot. I'll admit, some of it was my fault because I was going through some personal stuff and was feeling quite emotional, but there was something else bothering me too. She seemed distant and expressed some strange ideas about the future that didn't sound like her at all. This made me feel uneasy because we used to hardly ever argue about anything. I can't even remember the last time we had a big fight before April. It's been a confusing and challenging time for both of us. I felt really bad about arguing with her because I knew how important it was for her. The main issue we were fighting about was her not maintaining clear boundaries with this guy from work, and it was obvious to me that he was interested in her romantically. Then she brought up the need for space and time to think about our relationship and our future. She assured me that she still loved me, but things weren't the same anymore. I was confused, but I respected her request for space because I didn't fully understand what was going on. After a couple of days, she dropped the bombshell of divorce during a FaceTime conversation. It was devastating, and at that moment, I still didn't have a clear grasp of the situation, but deep down, I had a gut feeling that she might be leaving with this other guy. It's been a roller coaster of emotions and uncertainty for me. When she finally returned home in mid-May, I went to the airport to pick her up. As soon as I saw her, something felt off. She didn't even give me a hug after not seeing each other for a month and a half. When we got home, she didn't bother unpacking her luggage. That first night, she looked me in the eyes and told me directly that she wanted a divorce and that she no longer loved me. It was incredibly tough and hurtful, but I was still holding on to the hope that maybe our arguments and my emotional ups and downs had contributed to her feelings, so I tried to work things out. But the very next day, she started acting differently. She claimed she wanted to clean the house and create nice memories for the last couple of days before she left. I sensed something wasn't right, and I felt like she was hiding things from me. So for the first time in 7 years, I went through her phone. There, I discovered that even before she came back home, she was already in a relationship with that coworker guy, and they had even signed a lease to move in together. This was just a month and a half after she had left home at the end of March. She had told this guy that she was willing to give up everything to start anew with him. It was a devastating revelation, and it left me feeling even more hurt and confused. I still feel terrible to this day for going through her phone because it's something I had never done in our relationship before, and I felt like I had crossed a line. However, at that moment, I decided to take screenshots of her conversations with the coworker and acted like nothing happened, just to see how far she would go with all the lies she had been telling me. For the following days, I kept asking her questions about her and this coworker, but I never got any honest answers. Finally, that night when we were talking, I got really frustrated and angry, and I started pressing her for the truth. She turned it around and blamed me for my own issues, saying that's why we could never be together. Even during our heated arguments, she continued to lie. Eventually, she decided to leave that night, and as soon as she was gone, I sent her all the screenshots I had taken and told her that I already knew everything. I admitted that I was testing her to see how far she would go with her deception. She then claimed that they only started their relationship after she brought up divorce, so she argued that it wasn't cheating. She also said that she had been wanting out of the relationship for a long time but was just waiting for the right moment because she perceived me as controlling and abusive. Seeing her leave and knowing it might be the last time, I see her was one of the hardest moments in my life. I kept asking her to be honest with me and show some respect for our marriage until the very end. She had been an amazing wife for 7 years, and it's tough for me to understand how she could change so drastically in such a short period of time. I'm still left with a lot of confusion and questions. After she moved out, I didn't waste any time and hired a lawyer to file for divorce. She didn't want any of the belongings I got her, the house, the cars, or any financial support. She just wanted to end things. It's not a decision I wanted to make, but I couldn't risk her changing her mind, so I went ahead with the divorce process. I already have the signed paperwork back, so it's in progress now. It's been a tough journey, but I'm trying to stay strong and move forward. I wanted to make sure she learned a valuable lesson before I walked away for good. What she did was hurtful, and I was feeling really upset. So I decided to act without causing any harm to my own character. I gathered all the screenshots of her conversations with her coworker and put them into a PDF. Then I sent it to their boss. My hope was that this would help them understand the consequences of their actions and treat others with more respect in the future. And just like that, the both of them got fired from the company, a perfect way to start their love story. Even though I'm still hurt by her cheating, I didn't want to stoop to her level and ruin my own reputation in the process. It's been 2 months since she told me she wanted a divorce, and I'm happy to say that I'm doing a lot better now. My soon-to-be ex has been trying to contact me, begging for mercy. She told me she's been having trouble being able to find a job since, and the guy she moved in with is having second thoughts on breaking up with her, since he lost his job because of her. If she thinks I will help her in any way, then she's absolutely nuts. During this time, I've been trying to focus on myself and work towards building a new life and becoming a better person. I understand that neither of us was perfect, nor our relationship had its flaws. But what hurt me the most was how quickly everything changed. In less than 2 months, she went from being in our marriage to being in a new relationship and now living together with this person. It's been hard to grasp how all the memories we shared, the things we built together, and the plans we had for the future could seemingly vanish overnight because of someone new in her life. However, I've come to realize that dwelling on the past won't help me move forward. Instead, I want to focus on the positive aspects of my life and the opportunities that lie ahead. I'm learning to accept that some things are beyond my control, and I'm determined to create a bright future for myself. I believe that as time goes on, I'll heal and new adventures and joys will come my way. OP, I am truly sorry to hear what you've been through. It must have been incredibly difficult to see your ex-wife drop everything for her coworker and leave your marriage behind. It's hard to believe how quickly things can change, especially when you had so many beautiful memories and plans together for the future. I can only imagine how hurtful and confusing this experience must have been for you. It's not easy to come to terms with such a drastic change in someone you once shared your life with, but now it's essential to focus on healing and moving forward from the past. Remember that it's okay to feel upset and heartbroken, but don't let these emotions hold you back from embracing the future. Take the time you need to process everything, but also remember that you have the strength to build a new and fulfilling life for yourself. Surround yourself with supportive friends and family, engage in activities that bring you joy, and explore new opportunities. The healing process may take time, but as you move forward, you'll find that life has so much more in store for you. Take this as an opportunity to grow and discover new aspects of yourself. You deserve happiness and a bright future, and I truly hope you find it. Remember, you are not defined by your past, and you have the power to create a beautiful and fulfilling life ahead. Wishing you all the best on your journey of healing and moving on. Now, let's get into our second story for today. So, before my girlfriend, 31 female, and I, 28 male, officially started dating, we were actually best friends for a good 10 years. We were part of the same friend group and practically spent every single weekend together, and even more than that. However, we never dated initially because she used to be in a relationship with one of my best friends when they were younger, and I thought it wouldn't be a good idea to pursue anything back then. Fast forward a few years, she broke up with my best friend and began dating someone else, while I also got into my own relationship. Eventually, both of our relationships ended about 2.5 years ago, and that's when things got a bit complicated. We supported each other through our breakups and ended up hooking up after spending time together. As time passed, I developed stronger feelings for her and decided to take the plunge and ask her out on a proper date. However, she wasn't sure if she was ready for a new relationship, despite telling me she had cut off all contact with her ex-boyfriend. I must admit I got a bit persistent and eventually convinced her to give it a shot, and that's how we officially started dating. In the beginning of our dating, I had a conversation with my girlfriend about her ex-boyfriend. I wanted her to know that I was okay with her being friends with him if she wanted to, as long as she was open and honest about it. I understood that they had spent a significant part of their 20s together, lived together, and had plans to get married. So I asked her to let me know if they ever reconnected in a significant way. I also suggested that she inform him about our relationship, so there would be no confusion and their interaction would remain platonic. After a couple of months, I discovered that she was texting her ex, and this bothered me. We had a serious conversation about it, and she admitted that she didn't tell me because she wasn't sure why she did it either. I told her that I valued honesty and asked her to be truthful with me. If it was innocent texting, I assured her that I could forgive her. To resolve the issue, I asked her to text him right then and there to let him know about our relationship. We managed to make up after that incident, but the problem was that her ex would still come up in conversations occasionally. Even when she was drunk, she would admit to missing him and feeling like he hated her because he never responded. I began to feel guilty, thinking I might have handled the situation poorly by cutting her off from someone in an unhealthy way. A few days ago, something happened that made me suspicious about my girlfriend's behavior, and it had been bothering me for a while. She was always very protective of her phone, and whenever I needed to use it for simple things like directions, she would get defensive. So, when she fell asleep while we were both drunk, I made a regrettable decision to go through her phone. To my shock, I discovered that she had been living a double life behind my back. She was seeing her ex-boyfriend regularly, even on days when she wouldn't meet me. He knew all the things about her life that she had kept hidden from me, and I was completely in the dark about their relationship too. The situation had become so convoluted that he believed she was living with her mom, but she was actually living in an apartment with her sister, where I would often see her. Her sister, who I was also close friends with, was aware of everything that was going on and, to some extent, even her mom knew about it. The lies she told were constant, detailed, and carefully planned, deceiving both me and the other guy. It was a shocking revelation and left me feeling betrayed and hurt. Once I found out, I made her confront, and everything had just blown up after that. It was a difficult conversation, and things quickly got out of hand. The revelation shocked our entire friend group, leaving everyone in disbelief and causing chaos among us. To add to the mess, her sister advised her to cut me off, while my friend suggested I do the same to her. As I confronted her, she tried to beg and plead for me to stay, claiming she didn't want to lose me. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal and hurt. It's hard to fathom that the person I knew and loved for over 10 years could be capable of such deceit and lies. I mean, how could someone carry on with this trade, fooling me and leading a secret life for so long? It's like my reality has been shattered, and I'm struggling to make sense of it all. I trusted her completely, and now I question everything about our relationship. The fact that she could lie consistently, day in and day out, makes me wonder if I ever really knew her at all. As time went on, news of my ex-girlfriend's actions reached the so-called ex-boyfriend she had been seeing while we were still together. He was totally shocked and hurt when he found out about her deceit and the web of lies she had woven to keep both relationships going. He had genuinely been trying to rekindle their old romance, thinking she was single and living with her mom. He had no clue she was with me, living in a completely different place. When he confronted her about the situation, it turned into a heated argument, and he called her a gold digger and good-for-nothing cheater, and he too left. She lost not one but two relationships because she was being too immature. But it didn't stop there. Karma seemed to catch up with my ex-girlfriend in the following days. Her double life started to fall apart, and the truth came out. Her lies and betrayal not only destroyed our relationships, but also shattered the trust within her friend group. People were understandably upset and disappointed, feeling like they had been deceived too. As the truth became public knowledge, many people distanced themselves from her. Her deceit had a profound impact, and it was tough for people to trust her again. The charm that once drew people to her now worked against her, as they realized it had often been a facade hiding her true intentions. The process of moving on was gradual, but I surrounded myself with loved ones who reminded me of my worth and helped me see a brighter future ahead. Surprisingly, I haven't heard from my ex-girlfriend since the confrontation. It was as if she'd vanished from my life, and I must admit, it brought a sense of relief. I was able to distance myself from the pain and confusion, and it allowed me to focus on rebuilding my life. Not only did I distance myself from her, but my friends also chose to cut ties with her. It was a difficult choice for them too, but they stood by my side and supported my decision to move forward. Having them as a solid support system during this tough time made a world of difference. As I reflect on the past and the lessons learned, I realize that I deserve someone who values honesty, trust, and respect as much as I do. Going through this experience helped me grow as an individual and understand what I truly want in a partner. It taught me that it's crucial to set boundaries and prioritize my own well-being. Now, I can confidently say that I am in a better place emotionally and mentally. I've been focusing on my personal growth, pursuing my passions, and meeting new people who bring positivity into my life. While the healing process took time, I am grateful for the strength they gave me to move forward. Though the experience was challenging, it ultimately led me to a happier and healthier state of mind. I've learned to value myself and trust my instincts. Today, I am more hopeful about the future and open to the possibility of finding someone who will cherish and respect me for who I am. Opie, it's truly disheartening to think that someone who is your best friend for a whole decade could still betray your trust like that. I can't imagine how hurt and betrayed you must have felt when you discovered the truth about her double life, but I'm glad to see that you've found the strength to move on and prioritize your own well-being. You absolutely deserve better than someone who would deceive you and lead a secret life behind your back. It's incredible to see how you've grown through this challenging experience. It takes a lot of courage to step away from a long-term relationship and focus on healing yourself. I admire your resilience and your willingness to surround yourself with supportive friends who have your back. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. Hey everyone, welcome back. You won't believe what went down in my marriage. I'm going to tell you all about how my wife went from the considerate woman I knew to someone who would go behind my back for short-lived pleasure. I hate that this happened to me, but all things considered, I'm grateful it didn't turn out worse. We were both 27 and married for 4 years when things started to change. We decided to start trying to conceive a child, and she simultaneously decided to start a discreet relationship with our neighbor. Whenever we were leaving or coming to our apartment, we had to walk past his front door. We saw him in passing many times, but my wife never let her eyes stay on him too long. He was tall with dreadlocks and I guess handsome, but I don't really want to say that. She went out to the car for something one night and the next day. She started checking her phone a lot. I think she left a note on his car with her phone number. Besides checking her phone a lot, she was really jumpy and defensive. I mentioned that we were invited to a 4th of July barbecue that some of the neighbors were hosting. She stopped what she was doing and said she assumed I wouldn't want to go. I knew she was doing this because she wanted to go, hopefully without me there. I told her I would go with her if she wanted, and she said she didn't want to be the only reason I was going. You know, the stupid, tricky way that women reel men into arguing. I put my hands up and said, if you want to go, tell me when we're leaving, and walked away. At the 4th of July barbecue, the neighbor man we'll call Noper was there. I'm quite sure she was texting him at this point and told him she'd be there. He did a really good job of playing dumb, like he picked the chair next to my wife at random. It was like they both underestimated how observant I was. I already decided at this point that our relationship was in trouble, and if I couldn't reach her before she cheated on me, all hope was lost. We all chatted outside, over the music coming from someone's Bluetooth speaker. My wife paid me no attention beyond the occasional glance to make sure I was still there. She was busy gabbing her mouth about pointless stuff, mostly directing her attention to Noper, but including other neighbors so I wouldn't catch on. I tried telling her I was ready to leave, but since she didn't want to stop talking, she suggested I head back to the apartment without her. I tried staying longer, but I had to go back because I was tired. I finally gave in and went back inside. By the time I got to the window to look outside, Noper and my wife were gone. I went to his apartment and knocked on the door. He took almost a full minute to answer, and that bothered me. When he opened the door, my wife was obviously not in sight. He was dressed, but it wasn't the same outfit he had on 15 minutes ago. I knew it was a long shot because I had no proof, but I asked him if my wife was with him. He tried to look confused and said no. I asked if he was sure because she texted me that she was going to hang out with him for a while. This was a lie, but with a very perplexed expression on his face, he looked towards his bedroom for a split second. I knew she was in there. He told me again, but slower, that she was not in his apartment. I stared at him real hard for a few moments, then walked away without another word. Before my wife even returned to our apartment, I ordered a hidden security camera to install outside our front door. When she returned, she looked flushed and avoided eye contact with me. I tried asking where she was, and just like before, she got defensive and told me I was crazy. She said she walked around outside while she ate another serving of food, then she got caught up with a neighborhood gossip spreader. I knew she was lying. I didn't believe her at all, but it wasn't because I had proof. It was because I knew my wife's personality and that she was acting guilty. Before the obsession with her phone and constantly defensive demeanor, she would always communicate with me. Even if it was just her crazy and pointless thoughts, she would share them with me. If something was upsetting her, she would tell me. It was unlikely that she suddenly stopped having thoughts or complaints worth sharing with her husband. It was much more likely that she didn't feel like including me for one reason or another, and maybe that was because she had a fling going on. I called her brother to ask what I should do. He didn't think his sister would be capable of something like this because all she ever wanted was a happy marriage without betrayal. After I told him more of the signs I noticed, he suggested I wait until the security camera catches something before making any decisions. I agreed. After this conversation, I waited weeks for my wife to make up a reason to leave the apartment. Both of us worked from home, and we usually went places together. She never did leave the apartment without me. I finally decided to check what the security camera caught. It was showing Noper's front door and our own. Eventually, I saw, at 3 a.m., my wife leaving the apartment. I could not believe my eyes. She was moving very slowly, being careful not to make a single sound. She tipped her down to Noper's door and knocked. He answered within 10 seconds and let her in. I was furious. I sent the clip to her brother, and he replied with absolute shock. My wife never knew about the camera, and it was so small that she didn't see it. She didn't stop at one visit. The camera caught 3 times in 2.5 weeks. I told her brother about the additional clips, asking him what I should do. I was at a loss. Their parents had since passed, and I wasn't sure how I could get her to move out of the apartment without putting up a fight. He offered to come over while I dumped her, and I accepted. He showed up, and she was confused. I told her I had proof of her sneaking to Noper's apartment, and I would no longer consider myself married to her. Her jaw dropped. She started trembling and swore she would never do that. She was already less defensive than normal because her brother was there. I asked her if she wanted to see the video evidence, and she said yes. After watching it, she was silent. She had a very angry expression, but the only person she could have been mad at was herself. We tried talking to her more, but she was only silently fuming. Eventually, she stormed into the bedroom and packed a bag. I thought she was preparing to move out, but she only grabbed enough for a few days. She walked straight past us, out the door, and into Noper's apartment without knocking. Her brother and I stared at each other in disbelief. He helped me move all her stuff into the hallway of our apartment complex. I was actually pretty amused picturing her attempting to bring all this stuff into Noper's apartment like it wasn't a big deal. Over the course of a week, she managed to get half of her stuff into his apartment before he told her he changed his mind and didn't want her to stay with him anymore. This is when reality really sunk in. She called her brother and asked him if she could move in. He said no. Besides the fact that he disapproved of her behavior, he wasn't permitted to let anyone move in. Then she called me. She didn't know I had enough time to update the landlord that she'd moved out. She begged me to forgive her. She said this was the worst mistake she ever made, and she would do anything to make it better. I told her I would never be able to look at her the same way. I told her I'd always worry she was sneaking over to the neighbor's house or searching for someone to cheat with online. She cried and said more, but I had to hang up. 1 month later, she was still homeless. Most of the stuff I put in the hallway was already in the garbage. She would sleep outside, on the bus, or at strangers' houses. She managed to work a little bit, but not enough to afford a place to live or frequent hotel rooms. I felt bad, but she'd brought it all on herself. To help myself cope, I completely redecorated my apartment and had lots of friends over. Noper left a note on my door, apologizing. He contributed to the disaster, but it was mostly my ex's choices. 1 year later, we were officially divorced and I got the opportunity to move to Hawaii. I worked from my home or the beach and started dating a really lovely woman. My ex did manage to find a place to live with the man she met on the bus. Her brother updates me, and according to him, she is not happy. She's learned that beggars can't be choosers, and now she only focuses on survival. Wow, Opie. I believe you made the right decisions throughout the story. You kept your cool while knocking on the door of your wife's lover. You installed a camera, contacted her brother when you weren't sure how to proceed, and updated the landlord in a timely manner. I'm relieved that she walked out under her own volition and could not return. It's such a relief you didn't conceive a child with her before all this happened. I can only hope she'll become more self-aware and consider the consequences of her actions. She knew what she was doing. Her behavior changed because of the guilt and anxiety she felt. When her worst fears were realized and she tried to get you back, you stuck with your decision and didn't give in. As difficult as it might have been, it was very wise. Thank you for sharing your story. I wish you all the best going forward. Now, let's get into today's second story. I was married to my wife for 8 years when all this went down. I was 42 and she was 37. We had 3 black and white dachshunds. They were pretty much like our children. One day, when I arrived home from work, none of the dogs came to the door to greet me. That was very odd. Another thing that was very odd, my wife didn't come out to greet me either. I opened the room to our study and all 3 dogs came charging out. Why were they in our study with the door closed? Then the dogs gathered by our bedroom door, barking. The hair on my head was standing up at this point. I knew something was off. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I thought I heard whispering and scuffling. I popped the lock with a toothpick from the kitchen and the dogs rushed in, sniffing around. My wife was sitting on our bed in her underwear with her laptop, but it was just starting to turn on. She looked at me like I was a ghost. The dogs then started growling at our closet door. I opened the door and found a man, standing there in nothing but sweatpants and looking terrified. I wanted to put my hands on him so badly, but I only screamed in his face, asking what he was doing with my wife. He bolted out of our house faster than lightning. He didn't even grab his shirt. I turned to my wife, the woman I spent over 9 years of my life with. She changed everything in one day. She started to frantically apologize and explain. She went to the dog park months ago while I was at work. She met another man there that had a dog. Big shocker. He flirted with her and talked for at least an hour. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring because it made her skin irritated sometimes. When he asked if she was single, she said yes. I could not believe what I was hearing. He asked her out and she said yes. They went on a few lunch dates while I was at work, which eventually gave my wife the courage to bring him here for sex. I spat in her face. It was the least she deserved after what she just told me. I asked her why she didn't go to his house. And get this, she said he lives with his mom, temporarily. What a winner. I told her to get out immediately, and she just cried. She pleaded with me to reconsider divorce. She said separation is fine because I needed time to heal, but she needed me in her life and we could recover from this. I told her that she wouldn't be the judge of what I needed to do because she was no longer my partner as of this day. She let out a wail and started packing up her stuff. She was moving way too slow, so I started throwing her stuff out the window. She did not like that at all and picked up the pace. After she had her stuff together, she asked me where she was supposed to go. I laughed. Why didn't she think of this before cheating on me? I got her a taxi and told him to take her to the homeless shelter downtown. She was in disbelief. I don't know why. Maybe she didn't think I had the strength to resist caring about her after her breach of trust and infidelity. She didn't have any money or family, so this was it. She had to realize how shit out of luck she really was. All because I came home from work 1 hour early. During the time she was gone, I felt really bad. I'm sure she felt worse, but it was different being in the house with the dogs. They looked at me like they wanted their mom. How excruciating. But, the funny thing about life is that it's always changing. All living things change too and adjust to change whether they're prepared or not. My dogs and I started to accept the new norm after just a few days. During that time, my ex begged me to come get her, but I eventually blocked her number. I needed this time apart to decide what the best course of action was. I filed for divorce after a few weeks of separation. I couldn't let her back into what was now my house. She'd let in another man, and it would never be the same to have her. During those 2 weeks, my ex told me she was staying with an old friend from high school who wanted to help her out. I then sent the divorce papers to that address, and since she was history, I was the owner of the house and dogs. There was no disputing it. So, as devastating as it was to my wife, she brought it all on herself in exchange for a short fling with a dog owner that lived at his mom's house. I don't actually know where my ex is anymore. I can't believe it considering how many years we spent together, but she doesn't have the same phone number. The irony about this whole story was that several months later, I went for a walk in the dog park and met a woman. She had one chocolate dachshund. She was the most beautiful woman I ever saw, even though I don't put any value on that. After talking to her for a good while, I felt myself falling for her intelligent and kind personality. I asked her on a dinner date, and she accepted. One more thing I have to add. If I would have been the one walking in the dog park as a married man, I would have tried to bring my wife with me. If for some reason she couldn't come, you bet I would have kept my eyes from wandering. Before she cheated on me, I honored and respected my wife no matter where she was. I wanted her to be my life partner, and she was. No stranger in the park would have gotten to know me well enough. There's too many people in the world, but that doesn't mean I'll get a new one when I'm bored. Life is too short to break the hearts of the people who trust you the most. Wow, Opie, I have so much respect for you. You know how a good relationship is meant to work. Honesty, communication, and respect are probably the most important qualities to have between a couple. Your ex knew she was going behind your back to cheat on you and didn't care enough to stop it. She continued hiding it and sleeping with you as if nothing was wrong. Maybe nothing was wrong within your marriage, but she just simply didn't have the self-control or respect for you that was needed for the relationship to thrive. No matter what the cause, I'm sure you had a great lesson in self-control, patience, strong will, and letting go. Like you said, change is always happening. Time heals all wounds. Thank you for sharing your story, Opie. I wish you the best of luck and love in the future. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, Please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's story is a shocking tale of betrayal and proof. Imagine discovering your spouse's affair with her gym trainer, all thanks to your security guard. Stay tuned for all the jaw-dropping details. My wife, 31 female, and I, 30 male, were together for 3 years and married for 1. We were both very athletic people. We actually met in a gym and started flirting immediately. It was so easy to be around her and talk. I never talked so much before I met her. We became best friends and lovers. When we got married, our parents were just as excited as us. My parents paid for most of our wedding and helped us purchase furniture and things to start off. A new gym opened by our house, so we got memberships right away. I was really optimistic and hopeful at this point in my life. I really had no idea how challenging marriage could be. After just 1 year of marriage, it was like the infatuation wore off and we started to get irritated with each other. She felt like I wasn't opening up or communicating enough, but sometimes I just wasn't in the mood to talk. Nothing was bothering me. I just didn't have anything to say. We got through this once by talking things out, acknowledging our differences, and promising to focus more on each other's needs instead of our own. Then my wife suddenly started having her gym trainer over to her house twice a week. Her reasoning was that she'd hit a plateau, and bringing the trainer to her would help her to reach her new goals. Well, I wasn't born yesterday. We didn't have weights or machines in our house. I knew our relationship was getting older, and my wife was naturally a very flirty woman. I didn't want to be overly controlling and tell her I didn't want him in our house. I just wanted to see what she'd do with this freedom and trust. We had a hired security guard at our home, so I didn't feel overly anxious when I had to go to work. After the second week, she had her trainer at the house. I arrived home and asked him if my wife was behaving. He just shrugged uncomfortably. I asked him what he thought was going on, and he said he couldn't give me a fair guess because each time she had the trainer over, she sent him on a break. I was appalled. My wife was dismissing the man that could tell me if she was cheating. I asked if I could pay him extra to keep an eye on my wife, even if he had to lie to her and pretend he was going on break. He agreed. It was nearly summer, so my wife had the side windows of the house open on the day our security guard snapped pictures for me. I was at work 4 days after I asked him to watch her when I received them. It was like a slap in the face. I didn't actually expect my wife to be sleeping with her trainer, but my small suspicion and bribery led to the brutal truth. I was being cheated on by a shallow, flirty, sleazy woman that I tried to call my wife. I trusted her and gave her everything I could offer, but it wasn't enough for her to try and live an honorable life with me as her husband. All these thoughts and more rushed through my head as I printed the picture evidence and drove home from work. I thanked the security guard with a wave the moment before I unlocked and shoved the door open. They must have heard the door unlocking because they quickly got into positions that looked like training. With trembling hands and a faltering voice, I showed them the printed pictures of what they just did minutes earlier. The trainer's face turned ghostly white. He didn't want me to kill him, so ran out instantly and sped away in his car. My wife dropped her knees. She said this was the first and only major mistake she'd ever made in her life. She promised that if I forgave her for this, she would become the perfect example of what a wife should be to her husband. I completely doubted this, but I'm not a very expressive person, and the level of emotion I was feeling was too much to bear. I reverted back to spy mode, knowing I wouldn't stay married to this woman. No matter what, she would suffer for this. I told her that only a loyal, good wife deserves the things I provided for her, like jewelry, a hairstylist, a car, high-end clothing and shoes, everything. So I packed it all away and locked it in the trunk of my car. It took all day, and my wife was sobbing almost the entire time. Even though she swore to do everything I asked of her, she didn't help me. I think she might have suspected I was going to divorce her, but she was too afraid to ask. She also didn't want to tell her parents anything about what was going on, because they raised her right. They wouldn't be dashing to her rescue just because she let another man inside her home. No responsible or honorable woman does that. She slept on the couch for a week without her normal routine or privileges. She actually cleaned a lot, in the hopes that would earn my forgiveness. While she scrubbed the floors like Cinderella, I plopped divorce papers down. She really lost it. When she realized none of her begging and sobbing worked on me, she left the house to call her parents. They came and got her, but only long enough to lecture her, buy her some Walmart clothes, and bring her back to my house. It was humorous and frustrating at the same time. Eventually, the divorce was done. Through the process, she was sleeping on the couch of our home until she was ordered to leave. She tried asking if she was entitled to half of my business, and the judge laughed at her. He shook his head and told her she had a lot of growing up to do, that she lost a great man and provider because of her actions. She didn't even have enough patience in our marriage to ensure she was entitled to half my business upon divorce. She made it clear that she wasn't very bright, and she only thought about herself. OP, I am so sorry your wife went behind your back to sleep with her trainer. She brought him to your house while you worked for no reason other than to start an affair. A mature woman would never flirt or put herself in a situation to be alone with another man. Marriage has enough drama and tribulations without unnecessary temptation. Two people with individual minds must be willing to be honest and do everything in their power to have empathy and consideration for the person they married. It's lucky you have a security guard to clue you in on what was happening sooner rather than later. Your wife didn't deserve the life of security and love you had in store for her, and thankfully you weren't married long enough for her to get any part of what you worked so hard for. Thank you for sharing your story. I wish you all the best. Now, let's get into our second story for today. My wife and I were married for a long time. She was never very fond of fishing. My father raised me with a fishing rod in hand by the water or on a boat, so she went along with me sometimes, but for the most part she didn't want me to go. After years of marriage, we learned about compromising, so we let the other person come and go as they pleased as long as we kept each other in the loop. My wife would often go visit her mother or siblings. I would go fishing. I met a man at the lake who also liked to fish. He was great at it and always came well prepared with drinks he was willing to share. Sometimes his wife came along with him, and she wasn't bad either. I'll refer to them as Mr. and Mrs. Fisherman. When I told my wife I met a fisherman friend that brought his wife with him sometimes, she was instantly jealous and worried that I had flirted with Mrs. or liked her. I was too mature to feed into this, so I just laughed and told my wife I thought she was cute for being possessive of me. I had no idea she was about to ruin my life. She wanted to start tagging along on my fishing trips so she could get to know the people I hung out with. I think the four of us went on about 6 fishing trips together. In between those were times where I went alone or just me and Mr. Fisherman would go. On a night when I fished alone, I got a text from Mrs. Fisherman. She asked me if I was with her husband because he told her his plans were to go fishing with me. I told her no, I wasn't, which was decidedly out of character for him. He was usually very true to his word. I waited another hour and 15 minutes before packing up and going home. I was surprised my wife wasn't there. I called her several times with no answer. She returned home after 20 minutes, breathless. She said she didn't expect me back so soon and that she'd gone to a Zumba class. This was pretty hard to believe. My wife did Zumba occasionally, but the class never went this late, and it was far enough of a drive that she should have caught her breath by now. I wasn't sure how to approach her about it. We'd been married for 48 years, so the fact that I was suspicious of her was devastating. I just asked her if she knew where Mr. Fisherman was. As soon as I asked, I felt my phone vibrate with a text. My wife's heart was pounding, but she tried to be as normal as possible as she told me she hadn't seen him. She couldn't look me in the eye. I went upstairs to take a shower and found Mr. Fisherman's hat. Puzzled and growing concerned, I could only think the worst. I pulled out my phone and saw the text from Mrs. Fisherman. She said Mr. Fisherman just got home and he was acting weird. He said he lost his hat at the lake with me, but she already knew I didn't see him that evening. I sent her a picture of his hat laying on the floor of my bedroom. It was easy to see the bed was made in a hurry. We were disturbed at this point, figuring they must have slept with each other secretly. It was slightly easier to go through this with someone that was experiencing the same betrayal. They'd been married 43 years. I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but surround yourself with people. Talk to people about what you're going through because I never expected to lose the love of my life to something so needless and avoidable. After we grieved a little, we decided the next logical step would be to catch them in the act, and since we were certain they were seeing each other behind our backs, we went ahead and prepared divorce papers. I was at work 3 days later with divorce papers ready when Mrs. Fisherman texted me saying Mr. Fisherman said he was going fishing, but she didn't believe him. A follow-up text said she went to the lake shortly after he left, and he was nowhere in sight. We met outside my house and quietly unlocked the door. We heard noises upstairs, so we ran up with racing hearts and found them having sex. I had to look away while they freaked out and ended the session, frantically starting to dress. My wife was already crying. AP just kept saying Mrs. Fisherman's name, staring at her as he dressed, like if he looked away she'd disappear. They were both realizing how bad they messed up. They were just caught betraying us, the two people who loved and supported them for most of our lives. This level of betrayal and the feeling you get is indescribable. I had no idea how to behave. I was embarrassed, so I just threw the divorce papers at my wife's feet and left. Mrs. Fisherman ran out of the house with her cheating husband, AP, following close behind. They were divorced by the time my wife and I were. We had adult children that were so disappointed in her. Their relationship was never the same. They were as surprised and hurt as I was. She moved into a place 45 minutes away. The rest of her life didn't compare to what she lost. Everything she lived for the past 48 years was gone or tainted. I'm grateful for my kids calling me and keeping me involved with family affairs. Let this be a lesson to all. Cheating only brings pain and regret. Opie, I can't believe your wife cheated on you with a married friend you met fishing. It started as something fun and calm to do together with another couple who were also married for a long time. Your ex turned it into an unexpected opportunity to bring distrust and the end of your marriage. It's a shame that they couldn't resist this temptation for the betterment of their relationships and the lives they built with each of you. Because of this senseless infidelity, your wife's relationship with her kids has changed for the worse. I'm glad you had support during this, and after the fact as well. Do your best to remain hopeful and treat others the way you'd like to be treated. Honesty and compassion are main ingredients and everyday practice in a meaningful, successful marriage. I hope you are able to heal from this. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. Hey, everyone! Welcome back to the channel. Today, I have an unbelievable story about deception, heartbreak, and a shocking Easter revelation. You won't believe what happened when I found out my wife wasn't where she said she'd be. One quality I, 40, admired in my wife, 44, was her enthusiasm for holidays. She said whenever she gathered with others to celebrate, it felt warm, fuzzy, and magical. Easter was no exception. She loved dyeing eggs and taking the kids on Easter egg hunts. Even though our twins grew to be too old for Easter egg hunts, she maintained her holiday routine. In preparation for Easter, she collected and boiled our chickens' eggs, dyed them, usually with the help of our sons, and used them in the egg hunt for the younger kids at the church. Besides basically hosting the church event, she also planted a large combination of daffodils, crocus, and hyacinth seedlings. She had at least 200 flowers ready for sale 9 days before Easter. She transported them with her econoline from the grow tent in the backyard to her selling spot on the corner by the supermarket. I helped her with this project every year, including last year's Easter holiday, when unbeknownst to me she met AP. There were no clues that she was communicating with another romantic partner. She would just so casually tell me she was talking to her mother. I did not get along with my MIL. She drove me crazy, but I tolerated her for my wife and children's sake. By this Easter, our twins were 15 years old, so they didn't exactly jump up to go to Grandma's house. Thank goodness. I had a reason to stay home now. How could I have known I couldn't trust my wife when she told me she was talking to her mother or going to see her mother? On this Easter Sunday, my wife already had the eggs hidden for the children to find in the grass and trees behind the church. The teenagers wanted to stay home, and since my wife told me her mother was going to be at the church, probably close to my wife, I elected to stay home. About 30 minutes after my wife left, her mom called the house phone. I was a little concerned, so I answered it. It became clear that she never intended to join the Easter egg hunt this year. She was calling to see if my wife could come over after church to clip her toenails. I shuddered and hung up. Since I distinctly remembered her telling me her mother would be there, my hunch told me something was up. I let my teenagers stay home and went to the egg hunt. I spotted my wife standing alone, watching the children hunt for eggs. I walked over to her, and as soon as I greeted her, I saw panic in her eyes. She kept glancing at the church building, like she expected someone to come out any minute. She quickly asked me why I was there, but before I answered, she told me her mother would be back out from the restroom any minute, so I should go back home. I calmly and grudgingly told her that I already knew her mom wasn't here. Her face and neck turned red, and she started itching until she saw a man come out of the church and start heading towards us. She quickly told me the man headed our way was just a friend that wanted to date her, but she already told him she was married. I was confused and hardly had time to think before he asked me if I was the reason she ghosted him the past week. I said excuse me, and then told him she was my wife, and we were married for the past 19 years. He was immediately deflated and told me they'd been seeing each other for a year. I was taken aback. It felt like the wind was knocked out of me. She told me that wasn't true, and that he'd been harassing her to the point where she considered calling the police. I just looked at her like she was crazy and asked how that could have been happening without me knowing. AP called her a liar and demanded she tell me about their plans for the future. When she covered her face, he grabbed her wrist to move her hand, and without thinking, I pushed him in an attempt to stop him from touching her. This resulted in us fighting. I remember getting a few punches in before I blacked out. When I came to, the police were there and many of the egg hunting children were gone, left in a hurry with their families because of the brawl. I was seen in an ambulance, and it was concluded I had a concussion. The police told me what I already found out. My wife was cheating on me. The word got around fast from people that went to our church, and she was pretty much shunned by all of them. As far as I know, she was practically banned from ever stepping foot in that church again. I couldn't imagine my wife willingly seeing a man, even planning a future with him, all behind my back. It felt like a nightmare. It came to light that he had a child from a previous marriage who was present at the egg hunt that my wife invited them to. AP told me that he was ending things with her, as well since he had no idea she was married. He mentioned that she begged him not to leave her and said that she told him I was abusive, which was completely made up. It was disturbing to me how my wife could sabotage our entire family all by one idiotic decision. This was enough to end everything we had together as a family, and it broke my heart. The kids and I didn't deserve this. I read posts about this in the past, but since I never did anything to betray my wife's trust, discourage her, or disappoint her, I never thought she would have a reason to cheat on me. I was just dumb for failing to realize this would happen to me. Opie, I am so sorry you and your sons had to go through this. I want you to know it was absolutely no fault of yours. She lied about you being abusive to make it look like she was only doing what any other battered woman would do. Leave the bad man and find a new love. The only problem is she didn't leave you, and you didn't deserve to be left. She just found a new love, lied, and pretended everything was fine to your face. She tried to justify leaving her family after 19 years by portraying you as a bad spouse. You must realize that this happens to men who least expect it every day, so you aren't dumb for failing to realize her deception. Just stay strong for your sons, and remember that you can make the best of this life change. Stay hopeful and remain honest in your relationships. There are honest and good women out there who are looking for a respectable man. Get out there, be honest, and find as many things as you can to be passionate about. I wish you the best of luck in life. Now, let's get into our second story for today. My wife and I were chefs in a gourmet kitchen in New York City. We knew each other for 14 years and were married for 9. We enjoyed every day together, working nearly identical shifts at the restaurant. Ratatouille was our favorite movie because our hats were identical. A year after the movie, I actually adopted two pet rats as a joke for my wife. She loved them. She told me months later she didn't know she could get so attached to rodents. Anyway, our relationship was great and full of imagination and happy times. After our passed away, we decided to conceive. When we struggled to do so, we took it as a sign to adopt. Our daughter's first birthday with us was her 8th. She had some emotional challenges that we worked through together, through honesty and patience. It felt like our family was strong and united. So, when I got a phone call from the police 2 years later, I was extremely confused. I was at the grocery store with my daughter, and as far as I knew, my wife was working a shift at restaurant. The police informed me that she was at the police station, unharmed, but they wanted to ask me some questions. I was a little unsettled, and my mind raced until I got there. With our daughter under my sister's watch, the police started asking me questions like, when did you find out what your wife was doing? And how long did you plot revenge against him? All I would ask, repeatedly, what is going on? Where was my wife? What happened? I had no idea what they were talking about, and after about an hour and a half of interrogation, they believed me. They verified that I was at the grocery store at the time of the attack on AP in his own home, while my wife was there having sex with him. He was stabbed by an intruder while he was in bed with her. The culprit was covered from head to toe and fled the scene. My wife was the one that called 911. I was terrified. I started crying uncontrollably. My wife cheated on me and experienced this traumatic event. Then I felt relieved that I was recorded at a different place during the attack, being the dedicated father I was determined to be. As I shopped for groceries, my wife was cheating on me. I felt so stupid, even though there was no way I could have known. Then the police told me this guy was in critical condition, and he was having an affair with more than 4 other women. My wife just happened to be there when someone else wanted revenge. They let me go, and I saw my wife waiting for me. She looked disturbed and restless. When she saw me, there was brief relief, followed by great sadness when she remembered she cheated on me. I walked right by her, refusing to speak. She followed me, crying and begging to talk about this. I told her we were over, and that I planned to start seeing other people immediately. I sarcastically told her she made an excellent choice for an affair partner because he was very experienced. She admitted she was extremely stupid for sleeping with this guy after they talked for about 2 months on a dating app, but that was all he would ever amount to in her life. She pretty much demanded that I forgive her because she was worth it, and we already spent so many happy years together. I told her she ruined everything just before I slammed my car door and drove home. I called my parents and sister came over to help me through this time and try to make our home environment happy for my daughter. Within 24 hours, I filed for divorce. She tried to come home that same day and got into a fight with my parents when they refused to let her in. After some screaming, they actually managed to convince her to leave with just a few suitcases of her belongings. When our daughter saw her again, she told her she was very disappointed in her. Can you imagine that? Hearing that your 10-year-old adopted daughter is disappointed in you. After all we went through to adopt her and work through her emotional trauma, my wife let her down and made her a little less hopeful. That was enough punishment in itself, but my wife was obviously divorced by me, so she lost her home, and then she was also fired from the restaurant. I told our boss that we worked for the past 12 years, what happened, and how our relationship ended in the worst way possible. She lied to me that day. She didn't have a shift to work. They decided this made her untrustworthy and fired her for it. She was so deflated and disappointed in her life's new path that she didn't fight for her job, she just accepted it. She's still living at her parents', without a job or plans for the future. My daughter and I have been quite the opposite, just hopeful and keeping ourselves busy. Besides work and school, we go hiking, camping, sailing, and travel to fun destinations. Opie, I don't understand how your wife didn't think of her husband or daughter before doing this and stopped dead in her tracks. I'm surprised every time I hear one of these stories that the spouse failed to have a moment of clarity where they decide not to destroy everything they built with a person they claim to love. It's hard to believe these cheaters even have normal emotions or might have understand what a relationship entails. They blow it, and once the trust and loyalty is gone, it's nearly impossible to recover. Things are never as they were before it happened, and it's always better to end the relationship. The emotional torment of staying together doesn't compare to the temporary adjustment of separation. At least in separation, there's newfound hope in the future, instead of worry and paranoia. I believe that you made all the right decisions, given your circumstances, and wish nothing but the best for you and your daughter. You're an inspiration to us all. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. 29 male, recently divorced my ex-wife, 27 female, due to infidelity. My wife and I first met at a mutual friend's housewarming party, and we liked each other instantly. She was sweet and intelligent, and the more we got to know ourselves better, my feelings for her increased. Like every other love story, we went on multiple dates, dated, and married after 2 years of dating. If a psychic had told me that my wife would cheat on me in the future, I wouldn't have believed him/her. My wife and I were the kind of couple you would see wearing matching outfits and holding hands wherever we went. We were always all over each other, and she adored the ground I walked on. Our marriage was fun and happy, and we explored so much together. My wife was my first true love. I had been in relationships in high school and college, but they weren't serious. I was the shy teenage boy and adult who sucked at sustaining relationships, but it was so easy with my wife. We clicked easily, and everything was smooth between us. My wife worked as a hairdresser in a ladies' beauty shop while I worked for a construction company. We both looked forward to a simple and happy life and were content with what we earned. For the 2 years my wife and I were married, I never suspected my wife was cheating. In fact, it felt like a dream when I found out that she was cheating on me. My wife loved hanging out with her friends at least once a week. They would often go out on Friday evenings as a group, fix a picnic on Saturdays, or even hang out at a bar. I wasn't so social like my wife, and I didn't have a lot of friends, but I had one of my colleagues from work who I was very close to, and he was almost like my best friend. Before I found out that my wife was cheating on me, a couple of signs led to my suspicion. For example, my wife, who used to be talkative and would share the latest gist with me whenever she returned home, suddenly became reserved. She only talked when I asked her a question, and our conversations felt forced. She always made me feel like she was doing me a favor whenever we spoke, and I hated that. In the bedroom, she started complaining that I loved getting intimate too much and that life did not revolve around getting intimate all the time. If she wasn't complaining about that, she would tell me she wasn't in the mood. She always gave one excuse after the other. When this started, I thought she acted that way because she was very stressed from work and indirectly vented her frustration on me. I didn't take action immediately because I believed she would come around. There was even a time I thought I was the problem, and I began to reevaluate myself. I watched how I talked to her, my tone, and even how I acted around her. I was a very bossy person in nature, but I always consciously tried to talk to her as a wife, and I watched my tone all the time. I even went as far as taking her out to fancy dinners, because there was also a time she complained that I was getting boring, and I stopped doing the things we used to do while we were dating. I tried my best to rekindle our love and get back to the happy couple we once were, but nothing I did worked. She didn't appreciate anything I did, so I just stopped. When I stopped, I started paying more attention to her body language. For example, if I tried to hug her from behind like I used to, she would push me with her elbow and look disgusted. That happened at least 3 different times before I concluded something was wrong. Meanwhile, I noticed that she would dress well each time she said she wanted to go out with her friends. It's not like she wasn't dressing well before. She seemed more excited and took time to do her makeup and hair. The truth was, I suspected she was seeing someone, mainly because of her changes, and I planned to confront her once I had proof. I wasn't the kind of man who would wait 10 days or for eternity to plan a stupid revenge before I confronted her. I had serious anger issues, and I'd teach her a lesson before we got to the revenge part. One day, I was at home on a weekend, thinking of ways to find out if my wife was having an affair behind my back. Our relationship had gotten worse, and we were almost like a male and female roommate living together, and we only spoke to each other for important reasons. I watched my wife dress up, do her hair, and do her makeup. Before she left, she said she was going out with the girls, and she left. For some reason, my instincts told me she was lying. I can't explain why, but I strongly believed she was lying. So after she left, I called one of her girlfriends and pretended like I wanted to speak with my wife. I claimed I kept calling her number, but she wasn't taking my calls. When I explained everything to her, her friend was confused because she was across the country and didn't have plans to meet with my wife that weekend. Her friend also said that before they all hung out together, they would announce it on their private WhatsApp group chat, but there was no announcement, and she was sure my wife wasn't hanging with the other girls. Immediately I heard this, I knew she had either gone to be with her lover, or she had to be somewhere else. I wasn't even bothered about finding her, because I knew I could track her by GPS. Without wasting time, I left the house and followed her GPS, and it led me to a football stadium. To confirm this, I saw my wife's car parked outside and knew she was there. There weren't many people in the stadium, making it easier to spot her. When I saw her, I was shocked to see her with her little sister's high school football coach, and she was in his arms, laughing and kissing him regularly. The sight alone made me so furious. I wanted her to know I had seen her, so I walked to her and her AP, took out my phone, and started making the video as I walked to them. I was even talking in the video, as if I was addressing her parents and showing them how much of a horrible daughter they raised. When my wife heard my voice, she turned in my direction, and her face became pale when she saw me. She was so stupid to call my name and ask me what I was doing there, and I went straight and attacked the football coach. At that moment, I wasn't thinking straight. I was so angry and beat the hell out of him, but thankfully some people saw us and separated us. My wife didn't know if she should beg or stop me. She just stood there in shock and couldn't even say a word. I was hurt but tried not to show my emotions until I got home. When I got home, I cried a bit and spent a lot of time throwing out her stuff on our lawn. I also sent the video I recorded to her parents, and they were so disappointed and angry at her. Her sister was the most disappointed because she could not believe my wife would have an affair with her football coach. My wife did not come home that day. She came home the next day and kept banging on my door so I could let her in for us to talk. I told her I'd call the police if she didn't get off my property, and when she didn't leave, I called the police on her. She even resisted them and acted aggressively, so they took her away. Some days later, I received messages from Facebook, and it was my wife texting me with a new Facebook account. I had blocked her old Facebook account, and she begged me to take her back and allow her to explain everything. She claimed I was always so tired when I returned from work, and I didn't give her attention in time like I used to, and that pushed her to get the attention somewhere else. She also said she didn't love her AP as much as she loved me and was only with him because of how he made her feel. I was slightly disappointed to hear that, but it still didn't change the fact that she betrayed me by cheating on me. When I told her we were getting divorced, she pleaded that I shouldn't make a decision I would regret, and I should give her a second chance. How bold of her. Long story short, we ended up divorcing, and her parents disinherited her. As for her affair partner, her parents reported him to the school, and the school was tired of always getting different parents complaining about the same thing, so he was fired. Though this happened long ago and I moved on, it still hurts. I have decided to channel the pain and focus on something more productive. For now, I no longer have the time for women, and I don't think I will anytime soon. Opie, did your wife seriously say you shouldn't make any decision you would regret after she cheated on you? Believe me, one of the best decisions you've made was divorcing her. It's pathetic that she showed no remorse for cheating on you and even trying to justify her actions. I'm glad you moved on and have channeled all that pain in becoming more productive. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Now, let's move on to the second story of the day. I want to share my story here because my ex-wife, who I thought we would spend the rest of our lives together, cheated on me. My wife and I were lovers right from college. We met each other as freshmen in college, and our love story began there. 2 years after graduating from college and getting good paying jobs, my wife and I officially tied the knot. We always looked forward to getting married, especially her. She looked forward to wearing a wedding band and a pretty gown, so we had a small wedding and started life on a fresh slate. Back in college, we both studied different courses, and as expected, we had different jobs. I worked as an electrician while my wife was in the business sphere. She was a business consultant, and we were both comfortable. We split the bills equally, and we shared responsibilities too. I wasn't the kind of man who would leave all the chores for her, so I ensured I helped whenever I could. I did this because I knew she was always exhausted when she returned from work, so we worked on a plan to make life easier. Since we still lived in the same state where we attended college, what we did was, all of us who were close college buddies would plan a hangout or get together so we could continue with our friendship bond. It wasn't something we did all the time. It was something we planned every 3 to 4 months. Most times, we'd even push it to the end of the year so we could have enough time to prepare well. It was never something big. We were only catching up and trying to support one another however we could. We did this from the next year we left college, and we continued with it even after we married. There were always people who didn't make it to our hangouts, and that's because they were either in another state, always busy with work, or living in a different country. While my wife and I were still in college, there was this particular guy I didn't like. He loved to brag, and he and my wife had a history before I met her. I didn't like him because I always felt like I was competing with him to get my wife's attention whenever he was around. I know it sounds insecure, but I had to ask my wife to pick between him and our relationship, and she picked me. After she picked me, I asked her to stop talking to him and cut all sorts of communication with him, and she did just that. We were married for almost 3 years, and towards our third anniversary, I noticed that my wife started acting differently. She wasn't cold or anything. She just seemed less concerned with what was going on with me. Before I noticed her changes, we used to be very close, and we talked and gossiped about everything, but she just changed, and I couldn't help but notice it. Even when she started acting differently, I never thought she could have been cheating on me. I just thought it was one of her aggressive mood swings and expected she would return to her normal self with time. One day, after returning from work and relaxing a bit, I decided to log into my Facebook account on our home computer. I didn't have the Facebook app on my personal phone or computer because I was a social media addict, and the only way I could remain productive was by deleting the apps and downloading them on our home computer so I could only surf social media in my spare time. In fact, this was a little productivity rule my wife and I followed, so we only used the home computer for social media like Facebook and Instagram. On that fateful day, as I was about to log into my Facebook account on the computer, I realized that my wife's account was still on. Initially, I just wanted to log out on her behalf, but my curiosity had the best of me. She had a lot of unread messages, and I decided to take a quick look at the people she had been talking to and the kind of conversations they had. To my greatest surprise, I discovered that my wife had been talking to the same college friend she had a fling with before we met. I was shocked to read the flirty conversation between my wife and this guy she knew I didn't like. As I went down their chat, I discovered that they had been seeing each other weekly, and she was even talking about going to his place later that week so they could catch up and finish off where they had left the last time. At that moment, everything felt like a joke to me. I was even laughing in disbelief as I read their conversation. I found it very difficult to believe that my wife had been cheating on me for months while I waited for her to return to her old self. After minutes of thinking of all the possible reasons my wife had to cheat on me, I realized there was no good enough reason for her to break my trust like that. I even became so angry, and I took pictures of their conversation with my phone. I wanted to pay her for the pain she caused me, so I changed her Facebook password, and since her email was logged in on the computer, it was easier for me to reset her password. After that, I posted the pictures of their conversation on her Facebook account, made a post as my wife, and announced to the world that my wife, was a cheap cheat, and I destroyed my marriage by cheating on my good husband. After that, I logged out of her account and went to her room to pack my property. Later, when she came home that evening, she met me while I was quiet and drinking, and she began to tell me how she received calls from some of our mutual Facebook friends about a post she had made on Facebook. She said someone must have hacked into her account and made that post to ruin her marriage. She even tried to log in, but when she couldn't get the correct password, she concluded that her account had been hacked. I didn't say anything while she talked. I kept drinking, and I watched her as she talked and complained. When I was done drinking to my satisfaction, I told her I knew she was cheating on me with the same guy she had a history with back in college, and she denied it. To show how manipulative she was, she began to cry and said I believed a stranger's post online and not her. I didn't even know when I started laughing, and she was shocked to see me react that way. I couldn't pretend everything was okay, so I told her I was the one who made the post, and I expressed my disappointment in her. After talking, I went into her room, packed my stuff, and left her. After I left, she kept calling. She said she would explain, and that I was mixing things up, and I didn't give her the opportunity to explain. Weeks passed, and I didn't take her calls or return them. Aside from being so heartbroken, I started drinking, and it took me a very long time to quit because of her infidelity. I won't lie, my wife's betrayal wrecked my life. I don't know how people get cheated and move on like it's nothing. I tried to do that, but the harder I tried, the more emotionally messed up I was. She even claimed that she still loved me and that I shouldn't let her little mistake ruin our future together. Even though I still loved her, I knew I couldn't be with her. We divorced, and I carried on with my life. I still feel fulfilled that she was so embarrassed, and all her friends saw the kind of person she was, and they even judged her. Whenever I recall how she played me for a fool, I just wish she had the most miserable life out there. I'm so glad my friends were there to support me and talk sense to me. If not, maybe I would have taken her back and not shared the story. On the other hand, her AP dumped her because he was more comfortable with their affair when she was still married. I have moved on, but I'm so afraid of women right now. The only women I can keep loving are my mom and sisters. I've learned the hard way that true love and loyalty don't exist, except it's coming from a dog or a cat. Opie, people have different ways of dealing with heartbreak, and yours was alcohol. The most important thing is that you quit and have your life back. Women are unpredictable, and having a pet is usually better than ending up with a cheating spouse. It's great that you divorced her and have moved on, because it's insane to keep holding on to bitter memories of the past when you have a whole life ahead of you. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.